All right, welcome back to The Devil in Detail, the Grendel Reread podcast. I'm Eli.
I'm Ben. We're back for what I think is our 20th episode. Can you believe it?
Big 2-0, Ben. It's crazy.
Wow. Yeah, hologram cover on this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Golden sapphire foil, embossed, perhaps.
Funny, last week was a big week.
Huge
This
week.
week's also a big week.
Last week was the greatest podcast of my entire life. I think it's my best work. I interviewed my two favorite creators, and it was just amazing. And it was me and you.
Interviewed each other, so you didn't have to do anything. It was
so
sat
fun.
In there.
I've watched it through probably 2 or 3 times, like editing and doing stuff, just like so psyched on it. But it's gonna be awesome. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I mean, I'm sure you watched it. I'm sure everybody watched it. This week's gonna be no exception. It's gonna be another amazing week. We've got Farel Dalrymple coming in a few, which is amazing. I spent some time with his work. Speaking of which, here's Farel Dalrymple coming in.
Hit us with the intro.
2 in the box, ready to go. Be fast, then be slow. Yeah. Vivat Grendel.
It's like the devil is my best friend. On the roads with the pen to the fork end, or till time end. Like Orion, Jupiter my kin, bloodline private. We control the whole shit. The wolf won't beef, then we feast off the rip. Behold the devil in detail. Behold the devil in detail.
All right, welcome back to The Devil in Detail. We're here with Farel Dalrymple. Welcome, man.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here with you guys.
Great to have you,
Grendel.
man. And, we're going to keep on Grendelin here, as we say around the show.
You guys said that a lot? That you keep on Grendelin?
All the
Yeah, I
time.
kind of like rattled it off the first episode, like jokingly, and I loved it so much. And then I commissioned a friend to draw like the R-Chrome Grendel now, and so we have like a sweet keep on Grendelin logo.
I like it.
So Farel, let's start at the now. Like, what are you up to now? What are you getting into? What's going on?
I've been working very slowly on a book with Matt Kint for Dark Horse. It's one of his mind management stories. And I've been doing, this year I've been doing these daily drawings on Instagram.
Yeah.
And the idea is to do one a day, but I've kind of slacked off a lot of days, so I'm a little behind. But I'm trying to do one every day. And then I'm doing a children's book with a friend of mine, and it's
awesome.
It's kind of under wraps right now, but I mean, it's just, we're keeping it secret right now, but all 3 of those things are pretty much taking up my whole life.
Oh, that's awesome. Let's see. Do you want to start with Grendel stuff, Ben, or do you want to dig deep into the Farel's life?
Well, I mean, I guess Farel, we just want to ask you, like, how, you did this story 22, 23 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
It's a short one, and we don't want to assume that you're deep inside Grendel baseball lore, but are you? Do you have a history with this property as it was coming out from Kamiko, or was it new to you at the time, or what?
When it was coming out, I was familiar with it just because I would see it in the comic book store and in like the, like a fanzine or something, they would talk about it, but I never really read it or like collected it. I was more into like, I guess, Marvel comics and stuff back then. But I was definitely like familiar with the character, like aware of that character existed. But I got the job because of Diana Schutz. It was like one of the first comic book jobs that I got, jobs. So it was like, I think Jim Mahfood and Scott Morse and some other people gave her some copies of Pop Gun War. I gave her a copy of Pop Gun War.
Oh, nice.
And then so she called me, and I think I self-published that pretty much. I got a Xeric grant for the first issue.
Right.
And so she got my information from one of them and called me to do an anthology book that she was putting together. And then she had me do 2 other things, and one of them was another anthology she had called Autobiographics, and I just illustrated something in that. It was weird because I was the only person that didn't write and draw their own autobiographical comic. I just never done an autobiographical story. And then so the third one was that I guess someone else maybe dropped out of doing the black, white, and red story. So Diana suggested me to Matt, and then there was one stipulation with the story though, is that I think when she asked me to do it, she sent me some Grendel stuff too. So like I read up on it, but he wanted the because you read the story, right? Obviously you read all the Grendel. So that character in there who's like this weird, I guess he's like a pedophile or something, but he's like taking pictures of this young girl,
Bernie,
and you said his name was, the guy's name is Bernie.
Bernie.
The guy. Do you know why his name is Bernie?
I mean, no.
I'm assuming it's he's named that way. I don't know if I should out this or not, but I was given instruction. Like it was just like, yeah, here's this script, but Matt wants you to make this creepy guy look like a particular cartoonist that he doesn't like. So just like try to get the likeness as much as possible, so that was kind of interesting, kind of funny to me.
That's funny.
I don't really like that guy that much either. I was like, oh yeah, he seemed kind of like, if you're gonna portray someone as that he'd be the guy to pick.
Dang. Oh, that's awesome, man. Like the story that you did, it's a very important story in the lifeline of these characters too, of the character of Stacy and where it takes place. It's right in those original Kimiko comics. It's like kind of the last thing that happens in the Kimiko comics, right, Ben? And then they don't finish the comics, and then that comes back in Devil by the Deed. So it's kind of like we always say, a lot of these stories are like 1 or 2 panels from the comic that they then spread out into like a 8-page story to kind of flesh it all out. So bad choice of words there, not necessarily flesh it out. But
he ends up like adopting that girl, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like
yeah.
Or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of motivations were like, we question his motivations for her. And then also she then becomes the end of Grendel when she starts figuring out who he is. Uncle Hunter is Grendel. And then she's the smart one. But so what else? How did you work with Matt as far as scripting and that type of stuff goes? Did he send you the full script, or did you work back and forth? That's how Mahfood said he did it.
Yeah, I think it was a full script. I think I might be misremembering this, but I'm pretty sure it was actually intended for something else. Like Matt was going to draw it himself or so, but and I got it through Dinah Schutz.
Okay.
So I didn't even really have any interaction with Matt until years later. I, met him and saw him a couple times.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, it was all through Diana, and yeah, she was like the first, and she also published my Popcorn War as a trade collection at Dark Horse too. So
sweet.
She was like real responsible for getting me like a lot of early career stuff. And then her ex-husband Bob Schreck worked at DC at the same time. Was like working at DC, and I got a job through him too. Just because it seemed like they would hang out a lot at like they just seemed to be around and like this small press expo and stuff like that. So when I first started going to do like comic book shows and stuff, they all seemed to just kind of hang out together, and it was just like, oh, we're at the bar together. And so I would go when I lived in New York, I would go to DC a lot and talk to him. But yeah, I guess Matt Wagner's wife is Dinah Schutz's sister as well.
Yeah.
So there's all this like whole connection of like, and they all worked at like Kimiko together back in the day too.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's last week they were talking too kind of about how Bob Schreck and Diana, they were kind of like the cool table at a Comic-Con. That's how Jim set it up. That it was like you and him and this like younger group of people like maybe Troy Nixie and Andy.
They said that it was just like kind of a melting pot of young up and comers and old guard, and there wasn't, a lot of static between the two generations, and just like people being happy to do good work and stuff like that.
Andy Watson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I have to know.
Skeleton Key, is that the name of the
That's
book?
the one, yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of your early work too. I mean, I think one of the first places I saw your work, I got this. It was another thing that I think Dinah Schutz put together that was an anthology. It had Frank Miller on the cover, and
Yeah, that was that. It was Happy Endings.
Happy Endings. That's the one.
Yeah, that was the first thing I did for her.
Okay.
I was like working at a coffee shop, and she just called the coffee shop I worked at.
Wow.
Like, this is Dinah Schutz from Dark Horse. Do you want to do something for this anthology? So I was like, okay. And she's like, well, I need like a promo image for it. So just send me like the first page of a story. And so I actually drew a page without actually knowing what the rest of the story was going to be.
Very cool. Oh, that's sweet.
Because I had to get this done right away. So I, kind of had a general idea of like, okay, I'll do a story about these characters. And then the first page was just, okay, this will just be like, setting the scene, I guess, basically.
Nice. I went to the Mocha Comic-Con in 2004 in New York City, and that was like a free giveaway, I think, or something like that. Was that a show you were at?
2004? I don't know. Maybe. I might have been there at that one because I left New York in 2005.
Oh, word.
So I probably was at that.
Nice.
I don't know if I had a table or anything like that. I might have just been squatting or hanging out with someone else that had a table.
Is that during the time you were with the Meathaus crew?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were still doing stuff. That might have been our the last issue we did.
Tell us a little bit about that like collective of people and how you got together and how you worked these anthologies out.
Okay. So yeah, I went to when I went to School of Visual Arts, I met a lot of really good artists and stuff. And a few of us heard about this. I think, okay, so like this guy that I went to school with, he was around the same age as me, I think, but maybe he was like a class under me. But he's like the illustrator Tomer Hanukkah?
He's in here.
Some covers for Vertigo. And he's like done his own comics, but illustrator, like a fancy illustrator. It was like him and that guy. Yeah, he's awesome. His brother, he has a twin brother that does comics as well, and so his brother was like a cartoonist in France. They're both from Israel, but Tomer went to SVA, and his brother Asaf went to some famous cartooning school in Paris or something like that.
Wow.
And so Tomer was doing like illustration, and his brother's doing like comics or bande dessinée or whatever you call them. And so he told us about this show Angoulême, and so I went with Tomer and James Jean, the artist James Jean, who did like all the Fables covers and stuff.
Yeah.
We all went to Angoulême one year, and then I went the following year too. I went 2 years in a row. But while we were there, Asaf introduced us to these guys that did this magazine called Spawn, like SPON, not like Todd McFarlane Spawn.
Yeah.
And they were doing this anthology, and it was like really inspiring and stuff. So when I came back, I talked with some of the other guys at SVA, Chris McDonald, and we came up with the name Meathaus and asked all of our friends. A lot of them went to SVA, but then it started just to be like people we knew that were like in animation or that we had worked with. Like one of the guys, I think he was in all the Meathouses. Or maybe he didn't come into like the second or third issue, but I met him when I worked at like this vegan restaurant, and he had some friends that went to SVA too, but he just was like, oh, I like doing comics and stuff. So, and then like by the last one we did, I think we did 8 of them. or we did 9 of them. So the last one we did was like a full color. There's only one in color. That one had a bunch of just people that were invited by other, like a lot, Brandon Graham invited a bunch of people, or I think he co-edited that one with Tom Herpick, but it seemed like there was like Tom Herpick and maybe like 3 or 4 other guys are all did the Adventure Time show, and it was like right before Adventure Time, so just kind of weird because it was like having that book. Like I still have a bunch of them, but it's like, yeah, there's so many Adventure Time artists in there. It's like, so that was kind of how I would sell it at shows. I'm like, hey, like Adventure Time, there's all these guys in it.
Is that still available on the Meathaus website, or?
I think so, yeah.
Well.
Yeah, Chris sent me some kind of recently, or maybe like a couple of years ago now.
Nice.
But if you can't get them there, I know Floating World Comics in Portland, Oregon has a bunch. They did, because I sell them through them.
Nice.
Might
have to get my hands on one.
I mean, I could send you one too. You could just contact, send me your address and I'll.
Okay, I'll do that. Sweet, dude. Ben, what's up? What do you got? You got a question?
Well, Farel, you should know that Eli is a huge Ninja Turtles fan, so I think he wants to get into your Xeric Grant experience, and
I was pretty interested.
Layered. I know that he wants to hear about that, so I'll
we're
that
so democratic. We're asking each other's questions. We're like,
I mean, listen, I want to talk to you about the caper and wrenchies and shared universe stuff, and we'll get into psychedelia, and there's a lot of really cool parallels between how the Grendel anthology, this black, white, and red stuff, isn't really linear, and then also kind of how like Sherwood and Orson's story kind of weaves through all these different projects in and out. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to try to sound like I'm an expert in your work. I think that to someone who isn't, I might sound like I know what I'm talking about, but to people who really know your work, they're going to know that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
That sounded pretty good.
I did as much as I could. It was funny because, I was thinking about you, and it was like, oh, I know this guy and his work a little bit. And the more I kind of reflected, I was like, I've read a bunch of your stuff over the years. But we really want you to drive and talk about what you want. But I know Eli wants to hear about Pete later.
Well, I'd rather hear more about, like how you won it. What did you submit? And then, yes, did you meet Peter later, chat with him?
I never met him, although I probably could have. I'm really bad at being social and like, like, oh, there's one of my comic heroes. I should go tell them that they meant to me or something. And then I don't do it because I'm just like, oh, well, I'll just not do that. And I'll just like them from afar. Yeah. But I did meet Kevin Eastman through Brandon again.
Oh, that's awesome.
He I guess a friend of mine worked at a bar in New York, and I forgot what the connection was, but somehow Brandon knew him, and we ended up just kind of hanging out one night, and he was just super nice, and I never paid for a drink, and I noticed he had like kind of a high-pitched voice, but he's like a real big dude.
Yeah.
Kind of a big biker guy, and I was like, oh, he's real nice. And I talked to him a little bit about Tundra. Well, I mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, your partner gave me some money to make comics with the Xeric grant, and then he kind of was like, oh yeah, I like that he does that. That's way better than like what I did with Tundra. Like I should have done something more like that instead of like
oh, that's
blowing all the millions of dollars or whatever on that company.
Yeah.
But then then Peter Laird stopped doing it because of the crowdsourcing thing. He said, oh, people can do fundraising now. They don't really need the Xeric grant anymore.
Oh, interesting.
But how I got that was like, I was just walking down the street and a buddy saw me and was like, hey, have you heard about this Xeric grant thing? You should apply for it. I was like, I'll look at that, So I think I just went on the internet. It was like, the internet was kind of new back then. And I just kind of like looked it up, and they said send us like, I think it was like, because they had like
You're frozen.
Like a jury of like 5. It was 6. It was something like that. So I just had to, on my proposal, like my expense sheet and all that kind of, I think I just had to give them 5 copies of it. And then right before I was mailed off the package, I put in a copy of a comic that I had done. Oh yeah, and the other rule is you had to have your work 90% done. So I think I had it like mostly inked, but there was like some pencil pages, and I just kind of sent them a Xerox of it. Or 5 copies of that. But then I threw in a copy of this comic that I did, that's my first like self-published comic called Smith's Adventures in the Super Mundane. And I got a letter back from them saying they're like, we wanted 5 copies of everything. So like, send us 5 more copies of that comic. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know why I didn't do that. But so then I sent them the additional copies, and then I just got like a letter that said I got I think I didn't even ask for the full 5,000, because it was like, you could get up to 5,000, but I think for like a 2,000 print run, it was like less than that or something. So I think I just got like $2,000 or $3,000, something like that. But
That's awesome, man.
I was like, printed my first, like, I guess, legit comic, and feel like I got work from that, because Diana Schutz contacted me. I wouldn't have gotten all those jobs probably if I didn't have that Zurich grant to put that comic out.
And was it Pop Gun War that you put out, #1, or?
Yeah, that was through the Zurich. That was a Zurich grant recipient.
Awesome. Good shit, man. All right, well, let's
actually put that in Diamond and stuff, because like back then you could be like, oh, I could do a self-published. I don't know how it still works, but it seemed like way easier to get your work distributed to comic shops and things.
Yeah, that way.
Because the first comic that I self-published, that I was just gonna give. I had a price tag on it, but I would just give it to people. More of just a business card. But this one was like, oh, this is actually in comic book stores, and I would get like, letters from other creators that made their own comics too, and that was kind of neat.
That's awesome. Man, I gotta find me one of those. And you just self-published it under, like, did you make a production company or?
So that, I think that first issue, there are these guys that do comics as well. I think they mostly do stuff for like First Second now, but these guys, Dave Roman and I'm blanking on it, John Green, they did a book called Quick and Forbidden, and I went to school with them, and I noticed that they were like super professional. Like they knew how to like scan pages and do production work and deal with like distributors and stuff. So I started asking Dave a bunch of questions about self-publishing, and then he was like, well, we should just publish your book. 'Cause they had like their own self-publishing label called Cryptic Press. And so I was like, okay, thanks, that sounds good. So I think John scanned all the pages of that first issue. So that first comic that I self-published, it has like a quick Cryptic Press logo on it. And I think like the first run of the Popgun War issue 1 had a Cryptic Press logo on it.
Nice.
Possibly. I might be misremembering, but I think I reprinted that too, but maybe that was with a different company, because there was this like other small press company that were doing like, they did like 1 other book or 2 other books. They ended up printing or publishing the like first 5 issues of Popgun War. Like, so it was like that, I got the Zurich grant for that first issue, and I think like 2 through 5 that they put out.
Oh, that's cool.
And then I did the trade through Dark Horse, because the guy that ran that company was like, oh, we're going to get to do the trade. We should get AIT Planet Lair to publish it. And I was like, well, if you're not going to publish it, I'll just ask Diana Schutz at Dark Horse to do it. They were just like, oh, well, I'll get, since they were putting out the issues, I figured it was like, oh, I should let you guys publish the trade, but if you don't want to do it, then I'll just take it to like someone that I kind of like. Oh, I like the other stuff that's going on there with that publishing company.
Yeah.
It seemed like they were, it was like Jeff Darrow and Art Adams and Mike Mignola. It's like, seemed like all these awesome guys were putting books out with Dark Horse back then.
Yeah, Diana's a very good judge of what's awesome. I feel like she's kind of always there.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to move into some of the psychedelia questions, Ben? Some of the storytelling processes. I picked out this one thing to start this section off from an interview that you and Brandon did. And he was talking about how some stories are passive art, which asks nothing of you and you just experience the story and it's fine. And then there's active comic art, and that's art that makes you think and doesn't tell you everything and lets you think. So I'll start this section with that and take it away, Ben. And that's what you do.
I want to hear what Farel has to say about that.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I mean, Brandon's really eloquent. He always he really enjoys like dissecting, you know, the way the comics works. Semiotics, is that what that's called? It's that makes sense. I'm just trying to think of like examples. Like I think like probably the comics that I like mostly to read are like probably more the passive variety.
Oh, really? Because I feel like you make the active variety, which
yeah, yeah. It's something I actually think about a lot. I mean, maybe not with those words necessarily, but the stuff that I consume, I feel is more. I don't even want to say garbage because I'm thinking of like examples of like you know, it's like even like Jeff Smith's Bone. I feel is more of the passive variety in the sense of like it's easy to read, like storytelling wise, or like
right.
Because
when you're reading, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say like one of my favorite cartoonists is that guy Tom Herpick that I mentioned, one of the Adventure Time guys. Mm-hmm. He's done 3 books, and his stuff's very, very provocative. Like, I think definitely engages. I have to like, I wouldn't say concentrate while I'm reading them, but it's something that does require mental energy. Like when I'm done with it, and like while I'm reading it, it's like yeah, it definitely makes you think more than you know, something like you know, like a Donald Duck comic or something. But
yeah.
You know, you know, it's like, oh, there's one that's like fun to read, and I guess like a lot of the like TV movies, you know, like I like this, I want to go see this blockbuster or something, you know.
Yeah.
But then
and Jim was telling us like, that you and him were talking about like shitty 80s action movies and stuff like that. And
yeah, like I love that stuff, and that's probably like what I mostly view, like engage with. But I don't know. Then you see like I guess the last movie I saw in the theater where I was like, whoa, was that a Parasite movie?
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
You know, I was just like, oh cool. I'm glad I made myself go to the movie theater, and I was like a captive audience and engaged with this thing rather than just like, oh, let's watch the new science fiction show or whatever. You know, it's just like,
yeah,
oh, this is kind of a
we definitely got to get into Star Trek if we got time.
And I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know. I think I just have some kind of I don't know if it's like when I create things, I can't if I can't start to think too much about like what the person reading it will think of it. You know, I don't want to. I mean, when I'm not creating anything, like when I'm not working, I do a lot of times think like, oh man, I should do something that would sell well, that would like, you know, resonate with people and stuff. And I think what I do is like when I'm working on my comics, like the last book that I worked on, I had 2 books come out last year, The Often Wrong, which is more like a collection of stuff, and Proxima Centauri, which is like a series I did for Image the year before. Whoa, I don't know, can you hear that? It's like raining real loud now.
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
I could probably try to shut in this window if it's noise is too much. But yeah, and then I get into, so like when I was working on Proxima Centauri, I'll have this story planned out, and then I'll be getting into the story, and then I'll start just, I guess, getting, I don't know, like high is the right word, but I start getting so into telling the that I can't think about like, oh, this is like, I want it to be clear, like readable, but it's hard for me to think about like, oh, stay on track so you can, this will be the next whatever big thing, or resonate with this big group of people, or like, what's my audience? You're gonna think, is this a young adult story, or is this just edgier or something? So I think like, when I do the work and then it's like I'm finished with it, it's like it's like really hard for me to take notes from people and get art direction and stuff, because it's like I already did that, I'm done with it. Like it's finished, and then I try to like, from there I try to figure out like, okay, I think there'll be people that'll like this. I think that people get what I'm going for here. And I think with that book in particular, Proxima Centauri, that was like a huge fail in that in that area. But I was just like looking at that book the other day. It didn't sell or anything, but I was like, oh man, I'm really glad I made that. Like,
Yeah,
it's like a lot of this stuff in all my work, it's like really personal to me, and I'm trying to like, I guess, convey this thing in a way, like dress it up in a way of like, okay, this is like a young adult science fiction story. It's like a emo, angsty comic, that will say all these things about like all these different things politically and socially and personally, and but yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's kind of silly for me to just expect people to get all that when it's like I didn't really like, so that's like, I feel like that's the biggest criticism I get from people. It's like, I don't really understand what's going on. It's like, oh man, I don't know how else to do that to make someone understand what's going on.
That's the part to me that makes it so attractive and enjoyable, is because it puts me kind of in like the driver's seat of how I want to perceive and understand your work, and for me, that's how, and for the other people that I think I would like talk to that read your work, we could have this kind of completely different relationship with the book, in that, we put it through our own, and I say this a lot, our own like creative sieve to like find exactly what it means to us, like, and that's what I thought with Popgun War. And it reminded me a little of the movie Slacker, Richard Linklater's Slacker, of how it kind of like moves from story to story, kind of like that. And
yeah, I like his stuff. I like, especially like my earlier stuff was really influenced by David Lynch. And I guess that's like one of the, I guess, consolation I take when people tell me that, like, I don't really understand what was going on. Like, I feel like those are the same people that would be like, I didn't understand what was he trying to say with that movie? Like, what, like they want it explained, and it's like, you can't, I don't know, like you can try to figure it out, and if that's fun, but like I don't do that when I watch his movies. It's more just about this experience, it's like it's mood he's creating, or like the ideas that it's provoking in me. And
we were getting a lot of Twin Peaks vibes from the early Grendel, and then Matt let it drop that they were watching Twin Peaks themselves, like while they were first creating and making Grendel. So we were like, okay.
When we had Jim on last week and he was talking about your work, we were sort of asking like, oh, can you give us any like insights, what's like Rosetta Stone insights on like how to approach Farel's stuff? And he said, just like in so many words, he said, well, you're going to step into his imagination. And that's kind of like a quality that I really enjoy about like my favorite cartoonists, but usually it's like an aesthetic thing. Von Bodie comes to mind, or Walt Kelly. Like when I got into that stuff, it was like you could sort of step into the panel and kind of chill out in the forest with them and stuff like that. And your work certainly does that too, but it kind of goes beyond that, because we can see thought processes and senses of humor and like ideas kind of chemically reacting with each other. It seems like there's, I don't want to say stream of consciousness going on, but like kind of like a stream of roller coaster consciousness. You were just describing things.
I like that. Yeah, I even I think in art school I read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man that James Joyce I think that was like a big had like a big effect on the at first self-published comic that I made. It's like I feel like a lot of the stuff from around that era of my life, that part of my life, that time of my life, I should say, it has like one of the biggest as far as like I was eating up a lot of more artsy things back then, I guess. Like I was actually reading books and I was like absorbing all this, like that's when I first discovered David Lynch and I feel like I'm still kind of like mining all that stuff like creatively, and then but like the books that I like listen to a lot of audiobooks now and stuff, but they're like, I don't know, like right now I'm listening to this I forget the name of the author, it's like Pierce Brown or something, but it's this Red Rising is the name of the series, and it's like this sort of it's like a science fiction story. It's but it's like far future, but it's like they're all human, like genetically modified humans, and they have these like different class structures based on like the different, and they have like they're all color coded, like golds are like the best, and they're different. I don't know. It's just
like Brave
it's
New
kind of
World
trashy,
type
but
of
it's
thing.
super fun. It's not even that. It's more of like military battles and stuff, and like interpersonal relations and stuff than it is like these cool science fiction concepts. Like they have like, like lightsaber type swords and grav boots they can fly around with and stuff, but it's not like hard sci-fi or anything. It's like a space opera,
It sounds like you're working. A little bit.
It kind of reminds me of like Prophet, but not quite as weird as that. Is Brandon made that series?
Yeah, that was a fun book that you did. Brandon was like the editor for that, the relaunch.
He wrote it. So
he wrote it too. Yeah,
he
that's right.
co-created it with Simon Roy.
Okay, yeah.
And I think he wrote the issues that Simon didn't draw, but like Simon co-wrote his issues or something like that. But he basically
so cool.
They co-designed the world and all that kind of stuff. And
right.
I just did 2 issues. I did a story in each of the trades, and then I did a cover for the 3rd trade. I did a couple covers, and then I did a smattering of pages in the next trade.
Nice.
But it was fun working on that, and I wish I had done more. But
is that about the only time that
was,
you've worked on like a known IP other than, I mean, you did Omega for Marvel, which I also read on
oh yeah,
that was sweet. But is that the only time that you really worked with an IP, and is that something that even really interests you? Or
yeah, I can't think of, I mean, I've done little things for Marvel and DC here and there, but nothing like
were you in the Strange Tales thing?
Yeah, I was. I just talked with someone about that kind of recently. I did a Spider-Man and Silver Surfer for the I think it was in maybe the 2nd Strange Tales story, or maybe it was in the 1st trade. I don't know if they did more than one of those, but
I think there is 2. I think there is 2, yeah.
And I did something for the Bizarro World anthology that who wrote that one? Oh, that was Dylan Horrocks. So Dylan Horrocks wrote, it was a Flash story, and that's how I got the Omega gig, was from that story.
What an amazing thing. In my research yesterday, I found that, it was written by a novelist whose work you liked. And then it was an older character that was like previously like from the Silver Age or Golden Age or something like that. The Omega.
Omega?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was from the 70s, whenever that was. And it was Steve Gerber, Howard the Duck guy. With I think Jim Mooney was the name of the artist. It's weird because there was like 4 people credited on it, which isn't that weird now, but like I feel back then that was kind of strange to have like 2 people writing it, because it was like Steve Gerber and Mary Screenis, which I guess like maybe his writing partner or something, co-wrote it, and then it was like Jim Mooney and I forgot who the inker was on it, but so Jonathan Lethem was friends with Bob Fingerman, and he wanted Adrian Tomei to draw Omega the Unknown, originally,
wow.
but he couldn't do it. And then he asked Bob Fingerman, he's like, do you know any cartoonists that would want to do this? And he had a copy of the Bizarro World book, because I think he had a story in there, and was like, you could, look in here, And I had, I was living, when I did that story, it was, so Dylan Horrocks wrote it, and I penciled and inked it, and then Paul Hornschmeyer colored it. He's a cartoonist too, and he was doing like coloring stuff, and I asked him if he wanted to color it. And I had, for photo reference, I don't use photo reference anymore because I'm lazy. I just use Google, I guess. But I actually went out with a camera and took a bunch of pictures of the Carroll Gardens, was like the neighborhood in Brooklyn I was living in at the time. And it turns out that Leatham grew up in that neighborhood, or like really close to it, like that same area of Brooklyn. And so he saw the Flash story. He was like, "Oh yeah, I want this guy to do it," because I had, he could tell from the pictures. He's like, "Oh yeah, this is like set in New York. I can tell from the backgrounds and stuff."
Oh, that's sweet.
So kind of weird coincidences that just sort of, ended up like, oh, okay, I guess I got comic book work because of this weird thing that happened. Yeah.
Seems like so many things like that, like just little chance things that you do lead to the next thing. It's like,
yeah,
oh, that's awesome. One parallel I saw in your storytelling techniques to Grendel is almost that you develop the world sometimes more so than like any main character, so that kind of like that we are comfortable in the world, and then we see these different characters interacting in that world, which is definitely something that Grendel is a part of as well, because we're constantly learning about all these other people, and then kind of Grendel comes in at the end in a lot of these short stories. So what does it mean to you about to build the world of your stories, and how some of them kind of like intertwine? And
because I'm trying to think of like your questions like in these two different ways of like visually, like stylistically, I guess what that means to me, like having a world, like, okay, so like drawing a comic, like it's important to me to have like, not just like, oh, I'm just going to put a background in here, I'm going to have like talking heads floating in space or something. It's important for me to like visualize the space that they're in, so it's like, okay, there's that kind of world, like grounded reality of like, okay, I have to know where they're at each other are in this room, and like practical kind of things. But I think also what you're really asking is about like the universe of like all my comics, like building this universe.
I think so, yeah.
And that kind of so that kind of just happened when I was younger. I was really into reading the Madeleine L'Engle books, her science fiction stuff, like Wrinkle in Time, and like that series. And I read some of her like young adult stuff too. And then I think it was in so she did like this trilogy, Wrinkle in Time, A Wind in the Door, and A Swiftly Tilting Planet, which are all like characters of this family, and they're science fiction-y, like cool stories and stuff. But she made like a fourth book that's kind of like, it's like a trilogy, and then like a sort of a follow-up book, and it had like these two, they were still part of that family, like these twin brothers, but they weren't really in any of those other stories. They were just sort of like side characters. And this was like all about them. And then in the front of the book, she had like a timeline, like a family tree, and it was like Madeleine L'Engle family tree, and it was like on the left and stuff, and then on the right it was like, these are all the young adult stuff. Did I freeze up again?
For a second,
just as you were explaining
Okay.
about the family tree.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
It was about her, or is it about the Murray family, or
it was about all they were in it, but it was like about basically all of her books. And so it was like this is like, these are all the books in my science fiction universe, and these are all the books in my like young adult universe. Right. And then there's these characters that inhabit these worlds, and then certain characters kind of would cross over and be in both worlds. And I just remember being kind of, you know, blown away by that and just think, oh yeah, that's cool. You can write stories that really don't have anything to do with each other, but they can still have your characters in them. And then I think when I was older, I read some Kurt Vonnegut, and I noticed he would do that too, just kind of write himself into a story, or, you know, there'd be like a guy from this story that's also in this one, and they were like totally unrelated stories. So I think just from that, I figure like any comic that I write myself, I just kind of want to I want to tie it to my other books in some weird way. Like, so that's why, and I feel like while I'm working on a story, a lot of times I'll think like, you know, oh, maybe he's talking to this character, and then it just kind of pops in my head of like, oh, that should be Orson, or that should be Hollis should be in the story, you know, and then I just kind of insert him in, and then it's just like, oh no, he's just in that story, and you know, and then after that, I'll try to figure out like, okay, how would this work? How would he get from there to there, and like what point in his life? And it's just kind of like fun, like puzzle for me to like spend the rest of my life doing, I guess.
It's awesome.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, and I haven't read everything, but that you know, it seems like this stuff about Orson and Sherwood, it seems, is like the root of the really personal, like Jonathan Lethem, maybe autobiographical stuff, perhaps, and that the key incident with them in the cave is a story that you revisit and kind of retell and redux more than once. That's also something that happens in Grendel, where key moments will get told in one format and then in another. And I loved it. And I don't really know what the question was. So I thought it was super cool that you were willing to kind of like go back in and re-examine and continue to flesh out these like really important moments that are super domestic and grounded on one layer of reality, and let them, you know, and to say to the reader, this is everything else is going to spin out seemingly from these key incidents. And I say this having not read Popgun War, so I don't know what happens there.
Well, that's kind of the hope, is that you can I mean, thanks, that's cool that you thought about that, but it's like with Popgun War and the Wrenchies and Proxima Centauri and all this, I want them to be able, like, even if you don't read any of my other stories, that you can just read that, whatever particular book you're reading, and it's like, okay, this is like a self-contained thing, and I don't need
and that was super clear. Like that intention totally came across.
Oh, good. Yeah, because sometimes people ask me like, oh, I read this and I didn't really understand it, or do I need to read this one in order to get this one? And it's like, well, I don't think it would help you understand it more or get more enjoyment out of it. I mean, it might help you get more enjoyment out of it, like if you're like nerdy like me and actually, oh, I want to know all the little details, you know, or like, one of the things I'd do sometimes if like I'm watching like a TV or movie or something, and it's like, oh, who is that? I've seen that actor in like a bunch of things, and then I'll go on like some IMDb thing where I start like looking up
Always do that.
all the actors thing.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's like, it's kind of like that. If someone enjoys doing that, I think it might add to that, but like, I don't think it's going to clear things up necessarily by like, oh, I didn't really get the Wrenchies. Let me read this Proxima Centauri to figure out more about this character. You know, it's like, well, if you did, you know.
Let's talk a little bit about like the process and some of the tools you use, because there's such a myriad of artistic styles that you implicate, yeah, I guess, and coloring styles that you use in order to drive narrative. So how do you determine how things, like what feelings you want to convey, and then how do you determine what tools to convey those with, and what, you know, coloring styles? Like the 3 stories in Popgun War 2, past, present, and future, are all done different ways. So I mean, obviously that was a clear choice. So then how do you determine that, and what pen do you use?
Well, the Popgun War, I use like that, the second volume, chain letter, I used pen and brush, and like the first volume of Popgun War Gift, that was mostly brush, except for the first issue, and that was like a bunch of different stuff. I even had like Zipatone in that one and stuff. Yeah, it just kind of depends on the project. Like and also like the time I'm at in my life. Like when I first started doing Pop Gun War, I was pretty much, I mean, I oil painted and stuff, but I didn't really use watercolor. And I didn't really think of like, oh, I'm going to oil paint a comic, you know, like I like Bill Sienkiewicz and stuff and Dave McKean, but I wasn't necessarily like thinking like, oh, I'll be a multimedia comic artist. It was more of just like, I'm just trying to learn art things and like who I am and what I want to be as like an artist. But I would make my own comics, you know. I just always would just be making, you know, drawing my own comics. So it was almost like two separate things with like coloring or painting. And this was like early days of Photoshop too. It wasn't like, that wasn't necessarily like an option of like, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, it wasn't until like a little bit later for me anyway, where I like learned how to Photoshop my comics. So watercoloring, when I first started watercoloring, it was more of just like, I want to color my own work. Like I want to control that, but I wasn't like formally trained as a watercolorist. So I think it's like when something's fun for me to do is like, oh, I can be messy with this and just get this thing done and it looks good enough. Like I'm able to be like kind of prolific. I feel like I was like kind of prolific when I was first learning watercolor. And now it's like, it feels like such a chore for me. Like every point of drawing and coloring and everything, just, it feels like work. It's like so hard for me to like find joy in it. But I feel like I'm way better at it now than I used to be. You know, like back then when I was like learning how to watercolor, like I look back in those things and I'm like, oh God, you know, like I wouldn't do that now. Like I would, you know, but it would probably take me like way longer to do now, or it does take me longer to do now. So I think it's sort of like just kind of becomes this like overwhelming thing. Now with Pop and War Chain Letter, it was specifically intentional because when I wrote that story, I was actually originally pitched that to Dark Horse. This was like years and years ago, like right after I finished the first trade for Dark Horse, I pitched to them. And I had this idea for like, okay, so Emily goes down in these tunnels, like Alice in Wonderland style. And there's these monitors where it's like the past, the present, and the future. And I thought, oh, that'd be cool to do each one with like a different art style. And then I was like, oh, that'd be awesome to have them, you know, the coloring be different, you know, in each one of them. And then I think it was like also a question, because I wasn't like the first Pop and War trade. It was basically my contract was, oh, will you guys publish this finished book for me?
Yeah.
And then I'll get anything you guys make past the printing costs, I'll get like 50% of, or whatever the horrible deal I had with Dark Horse was. So it didn't like sell tons, but it definitely made its money back there. Yeah. So I think like with the second volume, I was actually worried of like, oh, they're not going to be able to publish a full color book. So I had to figure out how to do the pages to the registers where like part of them were black and white and some of them were in color, and which is now it's like that doesn't even matter anymore. It's like it would be cheaper just to print a full color book, even if you only had one color page in it, like do it in China or something and just have it shipped over, and it would still be cheaper. But at the time anyway, that was actually a consideration. So that was the idea, was like, okay, so I want these different art styles. And I think like over the years, I think I ended up deciding to do that, the science fiction, the future one. I decided to do that with a pen instead of a brush. So I think like the main story, the Emily story, it's like a black and white comic, and that's brush. And then the present is the full watercolor. I ink brushed those in watercolor, and that probably looks like the nicest in the story. And then the past is kind of more of like this like monochromatic vibe to it, and that's like more of a mixed media where I left some pencil stuff and some brush, maybe a little pen, but then the future science fiction story, that was all pen, and I photoshopped that to give it like, oh, it's like the future, so Photoshop. I don't know. So that was like, those were specifically my decision with that book. But with Proxima Centauri, it was more of like, I wanted it to feel like this weird kind of nightmare world. And I was also, I was going through a lot at the time when I was making it. And I just felt like, I was like, if I'm doing this comic and it's this way anyway. If it's like this crazy chaotic world where you don't know what's up and what's down and all that kind of stuff, it might be nice just to, however I'm feeling that day, as to how I approach the page. So there's some pages where I might have like one panel that's like colored pencil and watercolor or something, and then the rest is Photoshop. And there's some that's just like I barely touched with Photoshop. There's some that's like all Photoshop. And there's like a couple pages I think it's just pencil, you know, it's not even ink it.
Yeah.
So,
it's so dynamic, man. It makes it
thanks.
so pleasurable to read, because, and not only because it like delineates between the things, not that like you need that, like it's clear in the narrative, but like it just makes it special. Like each time period, each different section is like special because you took that extra time to make it different, which is amazing, which I love. And I mean, it inspires me to.
I think too that might.
Good.
Oh, I think that might. I totally forgot what I was going to say. Yeah.
Eli inspires you.
Yeah, inspired.
Yes.
It inspires me.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I remember now. I think when you said it's enjoyable to read, I'm kind of suspecting that because, you know, if you look what's like sells a lot of copies, you know, and I'm not putting any judgments on whether something is good or bad. I'm just saying like this is like really like a lot of people respond to like Raina Telemaker's work, or the dog boy guy, the Captain Underpants, you know, it's like, I know it's like a younger audience kind of, but like, yeah. Like you look at that work and it's like, oh, this is like very like a slick, consistent, you know, thing that someone can just get lost in, you know. It's like why I think, you know, like Peanuts was so good too. It's like, it's very, very simple and deceptively simple drawings that look consistent, and you can just kind of get in this rhythm of reading it, and it's just good, you know. But I feel like when you know, like an artist like me that's kind of like, oh, I'm restless and I want to do this and want to do that, and then I think there's some people that look at that and like me, you know, if I saw that, I'd be like, oh, I love this. This is great. You know, this is so fun. You know, like I think like Tayo Matsumoto's like that a little bit. I'm trying to think if there's some other guys out there that I really like that, you know, right. I look at their work and it's like that to me.
Jim Rugg's Aphrodisiac too is another book that I thought did that really well.
Yeah. Yeah. He's amazing at like emulating different people's styles and stuff. Yeah. But yeah. And I think I'm wondering though, when people tell me like, oh, that I didn't really understand what was going on, it was confusing, if that maybe for that type of person, that's sort of what might have something to do with that. Yeah. You know, because like their brain, because like I know people that can't read comics. They just don't understand how to read a comic. Like my ex-girlfriend was kind of like that. There were certain guys like she liked Simon Hanselman's work a lot, but there's some comics that are like I love, and I'm like, oh, this, you know, look at the, and she's like, I don't really, what am I supposed to do? I can't read the word balloons first, look at the pictures first. So for some reason there was some kind of like disconnect, and you know, she never like learned that language, you know. Weird. It's just like, you know, so it is like, yeah, maybe it's what you're saying, like Brandon said, with the passive and the active art, you know. I feel like, yeah, the work I produce is way more yeah, I feel like it makes some people work for it, I guess.
Dude, you keep saying that people ask you, or they say that they don't understand the work. Is that something you hear a lot? And how do you like, does that piss you off? Yeah. Or you kind of like, then it works, you know, or then like you're like, whatever.
It doesn't pick me off. It's more of a, I understand it when people say that they don't, and you know, it's like I'm not like sensitive about it or anything. It's just sort of like a way for me to deal with, and it's mostly about like my most recent, like my
Proxima Centauri.
Proxima Centauri.
I felt that too, but like I dug that. Like I had another podcast, and you know, I was covering it every month that it came out, and I was like, I don't necessarily know what's happening, but I love it. Like that's not like, it's part of the joy of a comic, and that's what it's about. It's like, It doesn't have to be like Iron Man flies in the sky, punches,
Enjoy the ride, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I love
it.
it's a trip through your head.
Yeah.
And that stuff, that since you mentioned Iron Man, that stuff to me, I have lots of. I mean, I like all those Marvel movies and stuff. I enjoy the hell out of them.
Yeah.
But there's like some stuff in there where I'm like, okay, so if Iron Man's out having a party, right? So like in Iron Man 2, he has, he's racing cars,
Yeah.
and this is before Mickey Rourke showed up with the whips. They're like Elon Musk is there, like the real Elon Musk is playing himself in the movie, right. And they're like, "Hey, Elon, yeah, right, man." It's like what? So so I'm supposed to believe in a world now where like the guy who invented, he didn't even invent the electric car, but like the guy who runs Tesla, why would Tony Stark even know? He has like flying cars, like dad, like.
What did he even invent that Tony didn't already?
Why is he a thing? Like, it's Elon Musk.
That's hilarious.
Like
and
that,
why isn't Elon Musk like
the rest of the movie about that one?
Yeah. Why isn't he also a superhero? Like, couldn't he have built like a Tesla suit for himself?
I guess. Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, maybe in Marvel he's a superhero, but they're just not telling us that part because it's like, well.
Since we're in the realm of pop culture, I feel like I got the sense from 100 Years that you're a Star Trek fan.
Oh yeah, I love Star Trek. Yeah.
Me too. How do you feel about the new shows? Are you watching Lower Decks at all?
I don't want to talk any crap about anything,
you already did. That's it.
I watched I'll watch almost all of that stuff. I didn't make it past like more than a few minutes to the cartoon because I felt like, I mean, they were just doing like, I don't know if it was like fart jokes, but I felt like it was like on par with fart jokes, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of wasn't like what I like with my Star Trek, I guess.
I feel that.
So I was like, this seems a little too goofy for me. But I like Discovery. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I really enjoy it.
Me too.
And I mean, I understand some criticisms about it. Like I get why some people may be like, oh, that's not the Star Trek that I like, but I'm so like starved for any of that stuff. I'm just like, okay, I was really excited about Picard, but felt a little let down with that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it,
especially the Caper episode where. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot too, but I felt like it kind of floundered in the end, and it's like we didn't get.
Yeah, the end really bugged me.
Yeah,
especially when Riker and everyone was like, "Okay, cool, we'll help you. See you later. Bye."
Yeah, it's just like
took off. I'm like, you guys, the universe almost got destroyed. Like, no one's hanging out. You're not going to get dinner.
Yeah,
like,
and what was it like? Robot snakes or something? It was basically the end of Avengers. Is like the same thing.
It was like the end of what you call that Total Recall, where all their eyeballs and everything gets sucked out in their face, and then when they get oxygen back, it goes back. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, wait, what the heck? You guys,
Awesome. Okay.
It felt very much, instead of like having like, well, that was a good episode of Star Trek. I felt very much like, oh, we're building this sort of soap. We're trying to be like the soap opera-y type thing, when it's like, I mean, it's cool to do that, but I like, more like, like Deep Space Nine, I felt kind of had a good mix of both. And
yeah, they did it right.
Even Voyager too. I really like Voyager, but I mean, at the time when those shows were coming out, I wasn't really watching them though, so I can't.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't know how much of that is like nostalgia or what. It's more of like when I got like really into Star Trek, I don't think there was like a Star Trek show on anymore. It was
really?
like,
I made it all the way through Voyager, like sitting with my parents, like in the TV den, like an event every week, up until Voyager. And then once Enterprise starts getting in, I get those memories of like, I don't want to stay here with you. I want to go smoke pot with my friends. I'm out of here.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
So
yeah, it's like that age in your life where you're like, there's like stuff like I'm a teenager or a young person. I should be going out and doing stuff and not watching any TV at all. You know?
Yeah. Ben,
Yeah.
are you not a Star Trek
Feel
fan? I don't
like-
think we've ever talked about it.
I just like listening to you guys talk about Star Trek. I like Star Trek. One of my Farel, one of my favorite features of the conversation we've been having is when you've been sort of preaching about deep cut culture, high and lowbrow, whether it's Madeline L'Engle or James Joyce or Star Trek or the audiobook series that you'd mentioned, and finding, so that we can sort of see connections between, the content that you consume and what turns you on and how you sort of turn, approaches that you appreciate into your own work. So I would really just be curious, if you could like spitball some deep cuts on like what's awesome and what moved you, and like, I don't know, across sci-fi, fantasy, and horror and superheroes and all that stuff, or beyond.
Oh wow, deep cuts. It's kind of one of those things where like there's probably like a million things I could think of like after we hang up. But
Okay, but can you list at least 50 of them in a lightning round? Just like whatever comes to mind. Like what's like this like super tight obscure thing that everyone should know about, and you were the guy that was lucky enough to put it into your work? This is either a great question or awful question. I'm not
I
sure.
think if I could do a little,
You'll let us know later.
I'm gonna go over to my bookshelf or something. But this weird thing I just thought of when you said that, this thing that I thought was awesome. Like I actually looked this up kind of recently because I just became like weirdly obsessed with it. There was this show that I watched when I was a little kid called Other World. Other World. It's terrible. That's the thing, is like it's a deep cut, but I wouldn't necessarily say like recommend it. But there were things in it that like kind of stuck with me years later. That it was like a super low budget. I think it was like early 80s. I was like a little kid. Maybe it was like late 70s. I'd have to IMDb it or something. But it was like this family. I think they're like at like the pyramids in Egypt or something, and they go down like this weird tunnel and they get transported to this like alternate universe that's like this other Earth. And it's like
so
they go from like town to town, and like each town is like totally different. Like some of them are like Old West towns, and some of them are like run by robots, and they're just trying to find their way back, like find another doorway so they can get home. Nice. And I don't even think it was on like a full season. It was just like super cheesy. But like looking it up, I was like, oh, I wonder if this is on YouTube. And it was like, oh, cool, they got all these episodes up there. So I was like watching them. And so there's this one guy who's like a cop, and I don't know if he's just like the cop of the planet. Like it makes no sense at all. But he's like chasing them from like town to town. It's like he's like trying to find them. And it's Jonathan Banks from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. The guy who plays Mike, the sort of the old grizzled cop.
Yeah, he just came up with something else. He's all over the place in the 80s.
He's been in so much stuff, man. Yeah, like Beverly Hills Cop and all that stuff.
Oh man, I love those.
I was thinking of a fun show, but like
It's kind of like a Quantum Leap and Sliders in a way too, where you know it changes every week and it's a different world. I love that type of storytelling. Dr. Sam Beckett.
Yeah, I was a big Quantum Leap fan until they had the JFK episode, and then I was done with them. Because they were trying to say in the JFK episode that it was like a lone nut, that was just he acted alone. I was like, no. I saw the Oliver Stone movie. I feel like that episode was like a direct response to the Oliver Stone movie too, or something. Yeah. Like, I'm just no conspiracy, just lone gunman. I actually got this kind of recently. It's not a deep cut. It's like a newer thing.
Not deep cut, like but just like what's awesome, This, you know, Piao? No.
They're like in, where are they? Like Sweden or Switzerland or something like that. Some European country where, but it's this like science fiction anthology.
Wow.
X-Mag. And there's some cool stuff in here. This story in particular is really neat. There's this one that's, speaking of Prophet, this Yanni, the guy who did the bulk of the story.
Nice.
of the issues. Yeah, this is the awesome one. Between the Sun and Tides, Jonathan Dejab Nkondo. I've never seen this guy's stuff before, but I don't know if you can see that, but it's pretty cool.
Wow. Is it like screen tone colored or?
No, it's just offset. Looks like.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It's all black and white except for the color, but it's Piao. But yeah, I recommend it.
Super cool.
Oh yeah, and I just read this. This came out kind of recently. Lupus. Are you guys familiar with Frederick Peters?
Oh no.
He's Swiss. Top Shelf did this one, but he's a lot of his books come out in Europe first, and he had a series come out maybe like 5 years ago called Alma. Have you heard of Alma? Mm-hmm. So it's AAMA, and there's 4 volumes, and they're all like Euro. I think Self-Made Hero they're a British publishing company. They put out these 4 volumes of it, and that is a beautiful book. It's so good, and it's such a cool story. It's science fiction, like kind of far future science fiction, and a little psychedelic too. It's like sort of trippy, but his art style is very clean, colored beautifully, nice paper. I recommend Alma to everyone. This stuff's like a lot looser, and it's like black and white, but it's like a very like humanist science fiction story. It's like, you know, this couple in the space station over like a period of time, and it's really good. Recommend it.
Awesome.
But I way more recommend Alma, AAMA. That series is fantastic.
You definitely skew towards science fiction a lot, it seems, huh?
Yeah, I mean,
I do too.
I like fantasy stuff too. You know, it's like I like both kinds, country and western. But I feel like it's that thing I tell people, like someone's like, "Oh, you gotta watch The Wire," or "You gotta watch Mad Men." And I was like, "Does it have wizards or laser guns in it?" I don't know. I like comedy stuff. I like fantasy. If something's like realistic, you know, like, oh, it's so realistic. It's just the way it is in Baltimore. I'm like, that sounds horrible. I don't want to know it. I don't want to spend my life like you know, people getting killed and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
That's too realistic for me.
Yeah, I feel you.
I like to live in a little fantasy bubble as much as I can, you know.
It's nice to escape. Yeah, exactly. And we need that escape to the 24th century and the Federation. And
yeah, exactly.
Or to
society, here we come.
Yeah, or to futuristic 1980s New York, the dwelling of Grendel.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming. It's been a blast chatting with you.
It's good to actually interface with some other human beings, you know.
Agreed.
For me, I don't do this very much, so.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to have you back on the cast anytime if you're interested in chatting about another Grendel issue, or.
I gotta do another one.
Yeah, you do. Well, we've been Good.
Have you guys had Pat McKean on?
We haven't.
That would be rad. I would watch that.
That'll be scheduled for maybe 2023 because we're going.
When you do War Child.
Oh
Yeah,
we're going in sequence, so it's way down the road.
Oh man, that'd be awesome.
What year was that story actually supposed to take place?
Oh, I don't know. Is it 23 something?
I think it's a bit later. It might be.
Yeah.
It
So
might be
it's
a
like
few years later. Yeah.
So that maybe we could get the Grendel Prime crossover with Next Gen or something. The Enterprise.
Okay, great.
Oh God, that's a fan comic I want to see. Jesus.
Have you guys seen that show, Community?
Definitely, yeah.
Have you seen this newer show? It's been out, I think they just had a third season come out called AP Bio.
Yeah, I watched the first season of it.
I love that. I love both of those shows, and they're both great.
Yeah.
But there's watching it this season. I just rewatched all the Communities, and I was like, this should be in the same world. Like they should have a crossover. How great would that be?
Oh,
Just
that'd be
like,
amazing.
one of the episodes of AP Bio, it's like, oh, all the Community guys are there or something.
Well, just seeing like the Jeff Winger guy interact with I can't remember the actors' names, but you know, the guy from Always Sunny, like those two.
Oh yeah, the Glenn
actor-
Howerton.
Glenn Howerton, yeah, like to see those two guys act together, that would be good. They're so similar and snarky in a way.
Type.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God, that would be
Sure.
cool. Awesome.
Farrell? Have you seen Raised by Wolves yet?
I love it. Yeah, I
Ooh,
just
I can't wait for that.
I think there's like 2 new episodes out today too.
Oh, really? I'm behind. I've got a whole
Oh, I gotta
slew
get
to
it.
watch.
They've been doing them 2 at a time. I think they did like maybe the first 3. They dropped the first 3, and then like since then they've been doing 2.
Oh, it's 3 in a batch.
I gotta
Okay,
check that out.
That's cool. And then one. Have you ever read Hyperion? You know that book? That sci-fi book?
Yeah, Dan Simmons, right?
Yeah, man.
I listened to the audio book of it, and there was a couple of chapters that I just got really lost. I totally spaced out on because it's like each character is basically retelling their experience with this the Shrike creature thing. But I remember enjoying it. It was so long. It was like super epic. It's like
it's like 4 books.
Whoa.
I'm considering a comics bootleg adaptation, but I have to reread it first to get all the details with people's haircuts and what the lamps look like and stuff.
Really cool. I think that was like on a list of like top 100 science fiction books, and I just got the audio file of it because of that.
Yeah, I'll talk about anyone that will listen with that book. But it seems like there's a lot of parallels between that and Raised by Wolves, just like different.
Yeah, Raised by Wolves is
Oh, no.
It's like the killer roving. Got Ragnar from the Viking show in it. It's like this brutal scars on his face.
Yeah, I watched
yeah, it's good acting. It's like I like stuff where it's like I don't because I watch so many movies and TV shows and stuff. I'm not trying to brag, but it's nice when you're like watching something where you're just like, oh, I have no idea what's gonna happen next.
Yes.
Like I'm not even thinking about like, this thing's gonna do that, this person's gonna, it's like, where's this going? What's gonna happen?
Yeah, I haven't even watched it yet. I'm psyched for it. What about Orville? Did you dig on Orville?
I kind of hate watch that show.
Hate watch. Yeah. It really excels in that next gen style.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's like riffing off that big time. I have like a lot. It's like guilty laughing, like when I'm watching it, especially that Bortus guy. Whenever he's on the screen, I'll just like laugh at him. I don't think I've watched like the latest season of it, because I think my biggest problem, well, besides Seth Farland, kind of just annoys me. And nothing against the guy. I mean, I'm sure he's super nice and cool guy, but there's something about his face where I was like, what is it about that guy? But it's like, and I know it's sort of the point, but it's like, when everyone on the show is doing 80s references, like even aliens and stuff that are like not from Earth or anything, they're like, and they're like talking about like Billy Joel or something. I'm like, how does that person even know that expression? Like, what is that? It's like it's just it's like Kermit on the desk, You know, it's like
Yeah.
everyone on the show does it. Or I'm just like,
Yeah,
oh,
they're
okay,
watching
this all
Seinfeld
goes
on the bridge and stuff.
way too much.
Yeah.
But I don't mean to crush anyone else's joy if other people enjoy something.
Oh
like,
man, I
it's
dig
great.
it.
But,
Yeah. Awesome, man. I feel like we could talk about sci-fi all day, man. All right, cool. Well, thank you so much again for being here.
Yeah.
That was great.
Cool.
Yeah, man. Vivat Grendel and keep on Grendelin. Till next time.